Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lawless, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, well, the octagonal, and 3 games of the 14 have been played by the U.S., so all sorts of stuff when it comes to that. We'll also be talking my trip to Doha, Qatar, and all the, the craziness that went on there. We'll be talking our European roundup. Champions League is back upon us when it comes to what's going on over there in Europe. A bunch of questions, both from the hotline and from Ask Alexi. And speaking of that, I want to make sure that everybody understands and remembers that, yes, we do the hashtag Ask Alexi in our show, but we also have the hotline. The hotline is 657-549-2297. You can call and scream and yell and or just be very civil and mature and ask us a question and leave a comment when it comes to the show. Just wanted to remind everybody that we have that option for people out there. But before we do that, you know, first joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. How are you, Mosse, on this Monday, September 13th? I messed up the open a little bit there because I'm a little out of practice because I did miss a week here, but I'm gonna get back into the swing of things. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing well, particularly since I root for a college football team which is undefeated and which defeated Pac-10 opposition, Pac-12 opposition, I should say, this past weekend, which not everybody can say. You know, there are fans of certain teams out there that cannot say that right now.
My wife is a huge Ohio State fan, and so Saturday did not go well in the Lawless household, because when her Buckeyes do not perform well, it impacts and infects the entire day. So not good. But your Wolverines are okay?
So far, so good. Now, I know you don't know very many football players, but you do know Barry Sanders growing up in Detroit.
I know Barry Sanders. I met Barry Sanders, actually, in the post-game of the U.S.-Switzerland game in 1994 in the luxury suites of the Silverdome, rest in peace, the Pontiac Silverdome there. What an incredible low center of gravity. Of course, we messed him up because that's what we do in Detroit when it comes to football. We take great players and we mess them up. Barry Sims and Barry Sanders, or Billy Sims and Barry Sanders. So yeah, I do know him.
Well, the reason I bring it up is Michigan has a player who is the second coming of Barry Sanders,
really? By
the name of Blake Corum.
Okay.
Remember that name. You'll be hearing a lot of it.
I will remember that name. So you obviously watched a lot of American football and regular football over the weekend. Did you watch any other television out there of note?
I am all about finishing Downton Abbey.
Yeah, you're knee deep, my friend.
I have 10 episodes left. The season finale of season 5, which I'll watch tonight, and then the final season 6, which is 9 episodes. So I'm almost done. I'll be done in the next 2 or 3 days at the pace I'm going on. I've put everything else on hold. I'm behind on Ted Lasso. Right. I haven't even started Money Heist yet. The final season of that dropped on Netflix a few days ago. I haven't watched it.
Now, what are you watching Downton Abbey on? What platform?
Amazon Prime.
Okay, because there's a movie too, right? And you might have to go to HBO to see that one. I don't know, but
ironically enough, I've seen the movie.
Oh, that's right, you saw that.
Yeah, my mother is a big Downton Abbey fan. She wanted to see the movie. I went with her and enjoyed it, which is part of what inspired me to go back and watch the TV show. And I do plan to watch the movie again when I'm done with the TV show. All
right, well, let's see what I watched. Well, first off, I'll get to my trip, but when you're on a 15-and-a-half-hour flight, you tend to watch a lot of stuff. But other than that, over the last couple of weeks since we last spoke, let's see. Obviously, we had the 9/11 20-year anniversary, I guess, and so lots of 9/11 docs. I've seen a lot of them over the years, and there's some more that have come out to commemorate this moment. So on Apple Plus, Inside the Presidential War Room is really interesting. That follows the day that the president had, where he started in Florida and then up to Air Force One as it unfolded. And the documentation, presidents always have photographers around them, but it's really interesting to see the documentation and the people involved putting words to the stills that we had in that moment. You mentioned Ted Lasso. I got back from my recent trip and I guess binged a couple of episodes here. You know, once again, it has not jumped the shark. It has gotten better, but there is this. How do I say this? How do I say this? There is this element now that is creeping in that everybody has big problems. Everybody has these things going on in their life, and it's not that can't be good in a story like this. I just think I'm not sure how interesting these problems are, and I feel like it's becoming a vehicle to say bigger things about the world and life, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But anyway, that was my reaction over the last couple of weeks. There's a new one on Netflix called Worth, speaking of 9/11, about the man in charge of basically doling out the compensation to 9/11 victims' families. And it's just a fascinating look into the law and the personal nature of this obviously incredibly sensitive subject and moment, and how he and his group went about doing this. So that's really interesting. And then the Untold series, which is a series of sports documentaries on Netflix. The latest one is called Breaking Point, about a tennis player called Mardy Fish. It's not as good as the other ones. The Malice at the Palace was one of those in this series, but I do recommend that series because there's some interesting stuff. But this Mardy Fish one wasn't that interesting, I'll be honest with you. But anyway, that's the stuff that I've been watching. Anything else, Mossy?
That's it.
All right, you ready to light this candle?
Let's do it.
I spent last week in Doha, Qatar, where I attended meetings as part of a FIFA technical advisory group made up of FIFA legends. Now go ahead and insert your joke here. Full disclosure, I wasn't paid for my time, but I was a guest of FIFA. We discussed a proposal from FIFA Chief of Global Football Development, Arsene Wenger, which, among other things, calls for changing the World Cup from every 4 years to every 2 years. Now, this would be a big change, as the 4-year cycle has stood for the last 90 years. I listened with an open mind as Wenger and FIFA made their case. Now, FIFA carries plenty of weight. Now, FIFA also carries plenty of baggage that brings understandable skepticism as to motives. There are fair arguments against the change, such as diminished prestige or the harming of other existing competitions. The devil is always in the details, and there's a lot more to this proposal than just the World Cup change. Now, I haven't made up my mind if a World Cup every 2 years is a good thing or not, but I will say this. I am sitting in this seat today because of the World Cup. I lived the power of a World Cup. I was given the gift and the opportunity of a World Cup, and it changed my life forever. So, as I think about this potential change, I ask myself, how could I be against more players having the same World Cup opportunity, or even half of the opportunity that I had, and one that could potentially change their lives forever? Yes, sometimes less is more, and sometimes there can be too much of a good thing. But that's easy to say when you've already benefited from that good thing. All right, Mossy, we're back. You heard my State of the Union, and we did not have a State of the Union last week because of this trip to Qatar. It came about very quickly and kind of last minute. Obviously, Qatar and Doha is the host of next year's World Cup, which is where we'll be. I have never been to Qatar, so this was. My ears perked up when I heard that this was a possibility. And FIFA reached out and said, hey, would you be available to do this? And literally like a week or so before it. And, one, I was interested in the trip to Qatar to kind of get a feel for this area of the world and this location that we will be spending a lot of time in next November and December with the Men's World Cup. And two, for the opportunity to get with a bunch of interesting people and, yes, legends of the game, and discuss this potential change of having the World Cup happen every 2 years as opposed to every 4 years. And as I mentioned in the State of the Union, there's a whole lot more to this proposal, including changing the international calendar, and we'll get into that in a second, and all sorts of money that's being put and is being proposed to be put into Youth World Cups. And so there's a whole package that Arsene Wenger and company kind of rolled out for us. When you go to a FIFA event, I've done and been a part of different FIFA events, it is first class all the way, and it's wonderful. And I knew from the moment that I got this telephone call that this was FIFA looking to use this as an opportunity to influence people and to spin people and to lay out their case as to why this is a good thing, and lay out their case to some higher profile people and legends, and then me, to kind of disseminate this out to the world. I also recognized that there are multiple sides to a subject like this and multiple arguments out there. And I made it very, very clear from the moment that I got to Qatar that my mind was not made up, and that I was there to listen, and to listen respectfully, and to try to learn more about why Arsene Wenger and his group and FIFA were proponents of this happening. Mossy, have you ever been to Qatar?
I have not.
It is everything that they say it is in that it is incredibly hot. Okay, there is no chance that we could have had the World Cup in summer. I mean, we've all lived through hot types of things. This is a whole nother level of hot. It's opulent. It has got a little Vegas. I'm talking about Doha. It's got a little Vegas to it, but not in the Vegas. Kind of, remember in Back to the Future, like the third Back to the Future, where Biff had the whole, he was in kind of he had made this whole ridiculously rich and opulent type of situation. Anyway, it's not like that.
That was actually the second.
Was it the second one? Okay.
Correct. The Hill Valley, 1985, where Biff Tannen rules the town, made all his money from gambling because he used that almanac.
And then he kind of lives in the top of this thing. It's not quite that, like ridiculousness, but you can tell that money is no object for this city that is basically made in a desert, where the desert meets the water. I think it's going to be phenomenal. Not without challenges. I think after this week spent there, my biggest concern is, and we'll talk about the FIFA thing, but just in general, the infrastructure that they've put in. They have spent a tremendous amount of money to upgrade or implement stuff, including subways. The freeways are getting bigger, because part of the selling of this World Cup is its proximity and the logistics and the ease in which people are going to be able to get to multiple stadiums and multiple games, even within a day. And that's all fine and well until the world comes there. And they have yet to actually test this in a real world type of situation. So they're hoping that when it happens and the masses come there, that they are able to deal with it in a efficient and comfortable way. And that's my biggest concern, because if people get there, this is a message that they're hoping to send out to the world. If people get there and you don't fulfill your promise of being able to do this with ease, then you lose a huge part of the selling point of having a World Cup in a place like Qatar and in Doha, where it's 20 minutes between stadiums, or the most it's 40 minutes between stadiums, and everybody is packed into one place. And that can be great, and it can also be mass confusion. So anyway, that was my initial impression, and ultimately after the week, my impression of it. But I'll be honest with you, remember all the talk about alcohol in Qatar? Never once did I even question that alcohol was not going to be available or wasn't available. So I think you can put your mind at ease if that is one of your major concerns. You're going to get plenty of drink. That's not going to be a problem. The stadiums. We were actually taken to play a game. The Legends. We played a game in one of the stadiums there, and this was one of the stadiums that has. They don't call it air conditioned, and I apologize. But for all intents and purposes, it's air conditioned. When that first came out, I think a lot of us were like, yeah, they're going to air condition stadiums, whatever. It is legit. I'm telling you, Mossy, I was, I'm the redhead walking through this desert, basically. So as soon as I get out of a car or out of the hotel, immediately I start sweating. So even from the bus that took us there, just getting to the stadium, I was dripping getting into the stadium. And yet it was almost as if I stepped through a portal and found myself in a completely different part of the world, and certainly in a completely different climate and environment. That's how dramatic the change is, okay? Now, the roof was open, and yet it was not only comfortable, but they told us they actually had to turn it up a little bit because it had gotten so cold inside. So I don't know what they're doing, and there's probably a hole in the ozone above the stadium. But as far as your comfort level, whether you're a player or whether you're going to watch a game, that shouldn't be a problem when it comes to these stadiums. All right. So that's that. You got a question first.
Well, never mind any of that.
Right.
You said you were surrounded by other legends of the
Yes.
game. One of them happens to be my favorite human being, the Brazilian Ronaldo, who I notice has more or less replaced Pele as that smiling Brazilian FIFA spokesman who they trot out, who's always in agreement with anything FIFA does. So what was it like being around him? I know Roberto Carlos was there as well.
Yeah, so let me give you a little list of the people that were there. So Ali Ahabsi from Oman, Emmanuel Amoniki from Nigeria, Jared Borghetti, my friend from Mexico, Tim Cahill from Australia, Yuri Djorkaev from France, Avram Grant from Israel. And by the way, like Jared Borghetti, wonderful, wonderful man. We had some incredible conversations. We were screaming and yelling about Mexican players and El Tri and the U.S. and all that kind of stuff. So that was really fun. Tim Cahill, what a wonderful gentleman and what a wonderful ambassador for the game and for his country. He now works in Qatar and is basically in charge of the Aspire Academy over there. So he's one of the few people I think right now that is consistently day in and day out looking at the future of Qatar after the circus leaves, after the World Cup leaves. And I think that's important because the circus will leave town. Yuri Djorkaev gave me a big hug when we saw him. Hey, President, because I was actually the president of the Metro Stars when he was there. Amazing how much MLS influence was there. Tim Cahill actually brought up MLS on a number of occasions during our discussions, saying how important playing internationally was for him, and that MLS was very positive and receptive to that and encouraging and enabling him to play with the national team. He will never forget that. Let's see, Ryan Nelson, who I had some really good conversations, former MLSer from New Zealand, Nuno Gomes, Roberto Carlos, as you mentioned, from Brazil, who lasted about 15 seconds in our Legends game, started at the left back, was on my team, and then put his hand up, and that was about it. So I had to cover his ass for the rest of the 3 games that we had. You mentioned Ronaldo, who was very much in this kind of prominent position and was deferred to at times and had nothing but glowing things to say about anything that was discussed and FIFA. Let's see, who else was there? Mikel Silvestre, another MLS influence from France. Peter Schmeichel from Denmark. We talked about guitars, and I'll tell you something about Peter here in a little bit. David Suazo from Honduras. David Trezeguet from France. Pablo Zabaleta from Argentina. And as I mentioned, there's a whole lot of other ones that weren't there that are part of this group, but that's the group that was there. Avant Grant, by the way, one of the nicest people you will ever meet in your life, and I really, really enjoyed spending time and talking with him. Okay, so we get there, and as I said, this was done a week before in terms of me understanding that this was even going to happen. You got to get all your papers done and the vaccinations, and you have to have all this documentation. But I got it done. I was running around Nashville during the U.S. Game there, trying to find a place to get tested. So anyway, I got it done. 15 and a half hours later, direct flight from LAX to Doha. I land, a stranger in a strange land, and immediately we're out at a FIFA dinner. And, FIFA, as I said, they do things first class. I was wined and dined at some very, very nice restaurants with some great food, some great conversation, great wine, and all of that. And you would expect that from FIFA. Then we start in on our meetings. And as I said, this was primarily to discuss and kind of, I guess, introduced to the world this proposal and this concept, with the recognition that this is a big change. This is something that would fundamentally change the way we go about doing what is the prize of our sport, which is the World Cup. Then there's the element of the calendar, and Arsene Wenger and many others from FIFA gave presentation after presentation. We were in this room that had translators. It was like the UN. These huge chairs in this big circle or this big square of people. Some people listening on headphones because it was being translated. Some people talking. You had the button to press. So it was very much like a United Nations or governmental type of meeting. But it wasn't as formal as something like that, in that you were encouraged to talk. However, most of it, and 90% of it, was presentations, PowerPoints, and discussions, and speeches, if you will, as to why this was a good thing. I want to make very, very clear right now. At no point was it said to me, or did it actually happen, that where there was any type of vote, any type of quorum, any type of poll that was done by the players that were involved as to whether they were going to publicly support this or not. And that's where it got interesting, because in the second day of these meetings, there was a press conference that was had that included, obviously, Gianni Infantino, who was in all of our meetings and was there through the entire time, the president of FIFA. Including Gianni Infantino, Arsene Wenger, obviously, as the catalyst and leader of this, your friend Ronaldo, Tim Cahill, and Peter Schmeichel. And I think that they were picked for a reason, in that they were very comfortable saying that this was something that they supported. And I will say that Tim Cahill, he was privy to a meeting a while back where he was adamantly against this, and his mind has been changed over the course of these discussions. I was actually one of the first people to speak in the meetings, and I made it very, very clear that I was coming with an open mind, but that I wanted to see the data. I wanted to see why and hear why they felt this was right, and that there are certainly other sides to this argument, and I wanted to make sure that I heard that argument. Peter Schmeichel came out in the press conference, and I don't think it was malicious, but I think the way that he positioned it, I think he made it look like we were all in agreement that this was a go, that we were all in support of, that this was going to that this should happen, and that was not the feeling that I got, and certainly not my view as to how it was. That being said, I mentioned it in my State of the Union. There's a number of different reasons as to why people think that this should be and should happen, and there's plenty of different arguments against it. When you first heard about this, Mossy, what were your first reactions?
Well, look, soccer fans, generally speaking, are traditionalists. They're averse to change. Mm-hmm. I try to not be like that. I try to have more of an open mind. And I'm particularly intrigued by any proposal that's based on the premise that the calendar right now is outdated and needs to be rethought, because that's something I've said many times on this podcast. My only issue after looking at that PowerPoint presentation that you tweeted out is that I'm very concerned about how busy the summers are for these players and the lack of an off season. And it doesn't seem like Wenger addresses that at all. The calendar he laid out has the World Cup occurring every 2 years and then all the regional tournaments occurring in the off years. So essentially he has 2025, the Euros, Copa America, Gold Cup, etc. Then 2026 World Cup. And then 2027 again, Euros, Copa America, Gold Cup, etc. Then 2028 another World Cup. So you still have players with international tournaments every single summer, which I don't like. I'm somebody who thinks the World Cup should be every 4 years, and then all the regional tournaments should occur in that in between the two World Cups, and then you should have the summer off, the summer after a World Cup, and the summer before, to give these guys a little bit of an off season. So Wenger seems more concerned about during the club seasons, the disruption that international football causes. So he wants to reduce the number of international breaks and streamline qualifying. And I'm down with all of that, but he didn't really address the summer part of it. So that's where I bumped up against it.
And that, to your point, you're absolutely right. And that was actually brought up at times in the meeting. And FIFA actually did a good job of anticipating the pushback. And so when I say it was brought up oftentimes by FIFA and by Arsene Wenger and saying, these are some of the pushbacks that we are going to get, and this is why we think. So for example, something like that. I think what it comes down to is that if there is space and time, somebody is going to fill it. And so they want to fill it, all right? Because to your point, if you play international soccer, I think even at this point that we have right now, there is the recognition that you are going to be involved doing something in the summer, okay? And so I think that Arsene Wenger and FIFA would say, if it's going to be filled no matter what, because it is, somebody is going to look at that and play international games and be playing, let's do it, and let's have it at the most competitive situation that you can get. And so, I mean, I'm just telling you what they would say when it comes to something like that. The calendar part of it, and just so everybody knows, because I know we're getting in the weeds a little bit here, but the calendar and the international breaks that we have. Right now, the way it exists, there are 5 international breaks. And for those that know and for those that don't, within those breaks, players oftentimes get on a plane, they go to whatever country they represent, and they play international games. And they do that 5 times a year, which means getting on a plane and leaving your club situation 5 times a year. Obviously, you're coming back. You can come back tired. You will come back tired. You could come back injured, all of that. So what Arsene Wenger has proposed is to get rid of those 5. And I think from his perspective, I know, he gave 2 options. One was having 2 distinct, but rather than 5, 2 distinct windows where international play occurs. One, let's say, in October, and one, let's say, in April. Or the other option is just to have one, a full month in October, where all of the qualifying and all of those games happen, and that is the only time that you actually go and play for your team. So you're taking one trip, although it's a much longer trip. And then you're done. And so from a club perspective, once that month is done, you come back to your club and you're with that club until the next summer. My problem with that is a couple of things. Number one, out of sight, out of mind. Our national team, when it comes, and by the way, I should say that this is being discussed both for the men and the women. And Jill Ellis is basically heading up and doing the same thing that Arsene Wenger is doing. Our men's national team and our women's national team, they are juggernauts and they are brands in of themselves, and they are marketing tools to a country that still is very young relative to the sport. And I think having your national team out of sight and out of mind for what amounts to 8 months is not necessarily a good thing. The other concern is, in that month, you are putting all your eggs in one basket. Let's say you have your best player that's hurt. That's a problem, because in that month you are qualifying for the World Cup next summer, or whatever tournament it is that next summer. And if all your eggs are in that basket and it doesn't go well for you, that's a problem. And I asked Arsene Wenger, and the 2 coaches were there, Arsene Wenger and Avram Grant, what they would want. And it was very interesting to hear this discussion about what coaches want. International coaches, they live and die on their results, right? And often they live and die on the ability to qualify a team for a tournament and then do well in that tournament. And if everything is focused on that 1 month and you're just not informed, you don't have the players that you need, I think that that's a problem. I would rather give you 2 bites at the apple if you are going to do something that it gives you, as a coach, a better chance of success. It gives you, as a country, a better chance of success. Now, it's not the elephant in the room, and I mentioned it in my State of the Union. There is obviously skepticism as to why this is being done. And a lot of people say, this is all for money. Okay, yeah. But why is that a bad thing? None of this happens without money, okay? None of the programs that FIFA has, none of the existing federations out there, of the 211 federations out there, none of them exist if they don't have money. And so it's obvious that many of them will look at this and say, this is going to be better for me in that I'm going to get more money. Okay. Now, we all can talk about where that money goes, and that is a big problem. But ultimately, if it was going to the right places, it stands to reason that it's a good thing when people are making more money that they can put back into the game. Here's the biggest problem that I see of this proposal. It's all fine and well to talk about a World Cup every 2 years. I can be convinced that is something. Actually, you don't need to convince me. I think people are going to go, and are going to go in huge numbers because it's a World Cup. But a World Cup is not a World Cup without CONMEBOL and without UEFA, okay? And these are big, powerful types of entities that have already come out and said this is not something that we want to do. And so until you get buy-in from them, it doesn't matter ultimately. And so that's, I think, the big challenge right now. And you've already seen it in terms of the way that they have responded to this. You mentioned the summer type of situation. Right now, the Euros, which is the next biggest tournament, right? Summer tournament, are every 4 years. They can scream and yell at this because FIFA can get this done. They have the votes to get this done. But once again, getting it done with the support of people that you need, even in the minority when it comes to voting, that you need, that's the trick. When it comes to every 4 years, if the World Cup were to happen every 4 years, you know what the next thing is going to happen? Euros are going to happen every 2 years. The Euros are going to happen every 2 years. And I want to ask you the question because there was a lot of discussion about the prestige and the loss of luster when it comes to the World Cup. Do you buy into that?
There's something to it, but it bothers me that the opposition have settled on that as the go-to argument against it. It reminds me of the discussion over the 48-team World Cup, which I'm against, but everybody has made that about dilution of quality when my much bigger issue is the format. I like international tournaments to have a coherent format, and I think that's very difficult with 48 teams. What they're proposing for 2026 is 16 groups of 3, which I find ridiculous. And so, likewise, in this debate, I think people need to really look at the details and come up with more tangible arguments against it than just screaming about how the prestige of the World Cup would be diluted, because that's sort of an intangible thing that you're not really sure until it sort of plays out. And so I don't think actually that's the strongest argument against it.
And look, I understand the visceral and personal reaction that we have to change. And as I mentioned, something that's been around for 90 years. And if it ain't broke, why are we trying to fix it? And I think that, the way that FIFA presented it to us was we're trying to fix it for a couple of reasons. One, to make sure that the international game stays relevant. And that's not necessarily assured with the power and the prestige and the money that the club game has right now. FIFA's right, I think, to recognize that. The other part is, FIFA and Gianni Infantino, he's in charge of the membership, all 211 members of FIFA. And giving those members, all of them, reason to believe, and a reason to believe that they are going to be part of this party that we have. Now, certainly giving more teams the opportunity to go to a World Cup and raising it to 48 teams, that in and of itself means that there are going to be those that in the past wouldn't be involved to be involved in this case, in future cases. So, when I think about what FIFA is and what it should mean to the sport, I think they're saying, hey, we're going to do this because every 2 years now, you as a country get the opportunity to do it. If you don't make it, then it's only 2 years later where you can try to get back in and get to that promised land. And we saw, Panama and what that meant to the country. They want more of those opportunities. But in the process, I think it is fair, and it is fair to be concerned about diminishing this product that you have. And nobody wants to kill, the golden goose. I think they just want to have it lay more eggs and more golden eggs that benefit more people. Let's see, what else can I tell you about the trip to Qatar?
Well, I mean, this might have been ill-advised on my part, but because we didn't do a podcast last week, I felt like the world still needed to hear your take on the U.S.'s first 3 octagonal games. Right. So I told Luis to include that in the first segment. If we don't transition to that soon, this podcast is going to be like 4 hours.
We're going to do it, but I just wanted to get that out of the way because, I know a lot of people when they see you at an event like that, and when they see you in that picture. I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I knew the reaction of people when you associate yourself with FIFA, and then when the reaction came out of that. If you see me out there on the road and you would like to discuss it further, please pull me aside. I don't regret it. I had a wonderful, wonderful time. I learned a lot, but once again, and I'll leave you with this: I have yet to make up my mind as to whether this is good for the game. And I said in my State of the Union, from a personal perspective, and maybe that's a little bit romantic the way that I'm looking at it, I want as many people to be given the opportunities that I was given. And it would hurt me to think that something that I said or supported or didn't support publicly would be detrimental and would hurt the opportunity. Who the hell am I to say that you can't have those experiences and have your life changed in the way that mine was? All right, we'll leave it at that, and we'll get on to the 3 games, because we didn't talk about the 3 games. I'm going to let you start it out in terms of, and let's take it in totality, because everybody's kind of talked about the individual games, and we'll hit on it a little bit. But in totality, was this a successful window for Greg Berhalter and the United States men's national team?
For 2.5 games, it was headed for being a catastrophe. And then a strong 45 minutes in Honduras has reshaped the narrative here. And now suddenly it doesn't look so bad. But yeah, 2 big picture points here. We all talked about how depth was going to be very important. And it was important in those 2 summer tournaments to build up that depth. And boy, that was really borne out, because the U.S. had all sorts of issues with, obviously, Christian Pulisic missing the first game and then playing the second, getting hurt in the third. Gio Reyna missing the last 2 games due to injury. Obviously, the Weston McKennie situation, which we'll discuss. Serginho Dest getting hurt. So I think this notion, we all love to sit down and talk about a best 11, but we've seen that in this qualifying campaign, it's going to be kind of make it up as you go from game to game, and you're not really going to very often be able to put out your quote-unquote best 11. So that would be my first point.
I mean, I think in totality, there is a feeling of missed opportunity. And yet, you know, this is the first go around for this coach and for a lot of these young, inexperienced players, and they got their first taste of what CONCACAF is. All right, if I look at the 3 games, okay, you play El Salvador to start this whole thing off. El Salvador is a good team. It's not a great team. The U.S. is better. I think that by the time that game was over, the feeling was, and I agree with this feeling, there was something left on the table. You get a point on the road and you should be happy. And yet I think there was 3 points to be had in that game. All right, fair enough. You get a point on the road. You come home, got to win your home games, right? Against a very, very good Canada team. Now you're looking at a situation where against a better team, but playing at home, and now with a game under your belt, the improvement wasn't there. And Canada had a lot to do with that. But after that game, there was definitely a feeling of that was not good. You needed to find a way to win that game. And then the third game is a tale of 2 halves, in that it was horrible in the first half and great in the second half. And so ultimately getting 3 points on the road against Honduras, which I think is a really good team, wonderful money. So I had said I wanted 7 points out of it. Maybe I was being a little bit greedy, but I don't think so. And given the way that we looked at these games, I don't think anybody predicted that this was how, if you predicted 5 points, I don't think anybody predicted that this was how it's going to happen. So in totality, you know, I would, if I graded it, I'm giving it a B minus. Okay. What would you give it in terms of grades?
Well, it's interesting. We all agree that dropping points at home against Canada was bad.
Yes.
And we all agree that beating Honduras on the road was good. It's that El Salvador result that was very polarizing. And it's funny because we all talk about Euro snobbery and how much U.S. fans feel condescended to. Mm-hmm. But there's even an interesting dynamic within the U.S. fan base where there are certain media people, I won't say their names, but I felt were a little bit condescending in that anybody that expressed any disappointment about that El Salvador result, they said, well, you must be some newbie that doesn't understand how qualifying works, and we're sort of lecturing them about it. And you know, I guess the thing I would say about that is over the next 2, 3, 4 cycles, if the U.S. goes to the place as a soccer nation that we think they're headed towards, will there come a day where the talent disparity is so overwhelming between the U.S. and countries like El Salvador that we will look at a 0-0 draw against El Salvador as an unequivocally bad result? Or have certain people out there just landed on this narrative that a point on the road at CONCACAF qualifying is always a good thing, that they're going to be stuck on that in perpetuity? I mean, if we're sitting here 20, 30 years from now and the U.S. has Spain 2010 talent, are we still going to be looking at a point on the road against El Salvador as a good thing? Because I think that's the crux of the debate. There are some people who felt like the U.S. was already there talent-wise in this cycle where they were going to be able to overcome all the external factors. And we found out that they're not quite there yet, that this qualifying campaign is still going to be a slog, and maybe we need to recalibrate our expectations and view a point on the road against El Salvador as a good result. But I think over the next 2, 3 cycles, that's going to be an interesting debate.
Look, I don't think that expecting to win a game like a game on the road in El Salvador means that you're naive. or delusional about what CONCACAF is. I mean, we just spent the last 2 years talking about how great this team is, and the potential for this team. And I think I said this on the last pod, but it really worries me that we are doing things to in terms of the narrative out there where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we have a generation of players that can't function without ideal circumstances, either in the grass or around there, then we're screwed. Okay, so I do think that raising expectations, even within a difficult situation like CONCACAF, is justified and right and is fair. And I liked the reaction to this team because it shows to me that whether it comes to Greg Berhalter as a coach or it comes to this group of players who have this incredible resume behind it, we should expect more, and we should be disappointed when that doesn't happen. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think that we are being greedy. So when I look ultimately at this, I think, well done to Greg Berhalter in terms of getting it right in the second half. But why did we get it right? Why did we get it so wrong in the first half? I love that he was able to adjust, but let's not try to go out there and take 2 steps back right off the bat and then have to recover for that going forward. But so I don't think, if you were on the fence about Greg Berhalter, I don't think that these 3 games changed your mind at all. In terms of people being on the fence as to whether he's the right man for the job or not. And you certainly have fodder right there that you can use to say this was wrong and the tactics were wrong or the personnel was wrong. I think the other thing that these 3 games showed is that the resumes don't play. Okay, if you just want to do it by resume or how much money you're making or where you're playing, that's all fine and well. But when it came down to it, players that don't have that necessarily, don't have the star stature and don't have that the huge resumes, they came to play. So much so that in that second half of that Honduras game, it was MLS players, recent MLS players, championship players that we don't necessarily point to as being the ones that are going to drive us forward. Now, that doesn't mean that those players won't be involved. And it might be a situation where CONCACAF qualifying is a certain type of player and a certain type of collection of players. And the World Cup might be different because those are much more ideal types of settings. And maybe players just function better in that. But it did bring up the question, if you had to pick one team to go through the CONCACAF calling process, either the Nations League team or the Gold Cup team, which one would you go with?
There is an Ask Alexi about that very topic, so let's not step on it here.
Exactly. I'm not going to step on it. I'm not going to step on it. I'm just teasing it.
And the last topic related to the U.S. we have to discuss is the U.S. and McKinney situation. What did you make of it, Berhalter's handling of it, and all the rest?
Look, we've all been young and dumb, and I certainly have been. And, these players, though, I will say, yes, they are young relative to the past, and yes, they are inexperienced, but they're not just complete babes, all right? And by the way, they have been nurtured from a young age and given every opportunity and every advantage to be professional athletes, and professional soccer players. So it was obviously a poor choice. I talked to my kids, well, that was a bad choice, and I don't want to talk to him as a kid because he's not. He's a young adult and he should know better. Even though he is young, he should know better. But this isn't a situation where you banish him from the team. I still think that I believe in giving people chances, and I believe that the personality that he is, and obviously the player that he is, this is an AYSO. All right, you don't have to like everybody that you're playing with, but you have to believe that they can make your team better. I would love to say that it's kumbaya in every team and it's a Ted Lasso-esque type of environment. But guess what? The reality is it's not. He let himself down. He let his team down. And ultimately, he let the country down. You had one job, all right? Even if you're all right, even if you're not professional, do it on your own time, okay? I guess in his situation, it would be do it on Juventus's time, all right? Don't do it for the national team, okay? You can have the maturity to control yourself for a week. Obviously, he didn't and couldn't. And that's disappointing because I expect more from him. And, you know, let this be a lesson to him and anybody else. And maybe it was a lesson that he needed to learn, although he has some problems over at Juventus. But I would hope that he is back in camp in 4 weeks from now when they get back in camp. And I hope that he recognizes that the onus is now on him, okay? He's being given a second chance. And just because he plays at Juventus doesn't mean that that is always going to be there for him. And so he's got to prove his worth once again to this team. And he's got to prove that he has learned his lesson. And I think that he will. And if he doesn't, then I'll come down there myself and kick his ass, okay? Because it's a reflection on all of us and everybody that has come before when you make a mistake like that. And like you said, you put yourself in a bad position, you put your team in a bad position, you put this country that you represent in a bad position. And that's a bad look for anyone.
Do you have an issue with Landon Donovan going on, I believe it was Grant Wall's podcast, and saying, I know what happened, but I'm not telling? Herculez Gomez had an issue with that. They're feeling like, hey, if you're a journalist now, you know, Landon's always kind of tried to skirt that line a little bit from being a media guy versus a player. And so it's...
I mean, don't say it and then not reveal it. Just don't say it.
Exactly.
If you know it, don't say you know it.
It's a little bit Mike Francesa-esque, you know, wanting to show off that he has the inside information, but he's not going to tell anybody.
Yeah, it's lame. It's lame. I just wouldn't say it. You know, I mean, because in doing so, you're kind of pumping yourself up. Is I know this, and that's one thing, but you're also pumping yourself up, you know, out of the goodness of my heart and you know, and empathy and all that kind of stuff. Nah, come on. That's yeah. You want to, you know. You want to get into it, then let's get into it. But you know, Landon is Landon. Anything else, Mossy?
So last thing is this crazy Brazil-Argentina incident. I was going to give you a whole blow by blow because I've read all the articles in the Brazilian media and uncovered some information that hasn't really been out there. But instead, because we're short on time here, I'll just say the only thing that bothered me is that was sort of misconstrued about the whole thing was that the Brazilian FA was in favor of that game going on and the Argentinian players being allowed to play. They were actually at odds with the Brazilian health officials who were the ones that stopped that game. And that's important because when the Brazilian FA then turned around and complained about the Premier League clubs not releasing Brazilian players, I saw a lot of ignorant, ill-informed tweets from Keith Costigan type saying, well, the Brazilian FA is talking out of both sides of their mouth because they pulled the Argentinian players off the field and now they're complaining that the Brazilian players didn't get released. The Brazilian FA's position all along was that they all should have been released. They should have been allowed to play in those games. And so there really wasn't any inconsistency on their part. And let me just say this. I agree. Obviously, what happened there was an absolute farce. Some knucklehead running on the field in the middle of the game and stopping it. It's hugely embarrassing, and Brazil deserves all the ridicule it's getting for that. But I find it equally farcical for Brazil and Argentina to play a World Cup qualifier during a FIFA international date, and for Argentina to have all the players they called up available while Brazil are deprived of half their squad because those clubs decided not to release their players. So FIFA got caught with their pants down here. The way they handled this was very poor. In previous windows where the European clubs didn't want to release players, they were able to postpone those games. But as we've talked about, the calendar is so crowded now that they've run out of time. They weren't able to do that. So essentially, these games had to go on. And you had some countries a lot more hurt than others because their players happened to play in England. So you had Jamaica having to face Mexico at the Azteca minus 11 of their best players. Paraguay had to play without Miguel Almiron. Egypt had to play without Mohamed Salah. So that really bothered me. I was already annoyed about the circumstances surrounding that Brazil-Argentina game. And then obviously what happened. And so, you know, the Brazilian FA then tried to get FIFA to bar the Premier League the Brazilian players on Premier League from playing this past weekend. But the truth is, they never really wanted to do that. That was just a bargaining tool to try to force some sort of resolution ahead of the next window, which they got. The British government has agreed to loosen some of those quarantine restrictions. So the Premier League clubs have said, okay, so we will release the players for the next window, and everybody goes home happy. So, people can criticize the Brazilian FA for it, but if they hadn't forced the issue to the degree that they did, we wouldn't have had a resolution, and we would have had the same problem for this upcoming window. So, I mean, that's my take on the whole thing. And, people can say I'm biased, but, if we had more time, we can really get into a blow by blow of what happened there with that Brazil-Argentina game, because there's plenty of blame to go around. I mean, but both federations did not cover themselves in glory.
Save the drama for your mama, my friend. I mean, come on.
And we'll see now if one country or other is going to have to forfeit. Most likely it would be Brazil, rightly so, because they were the home team and it's incumbent on them to provide the conditions for the game to go on. But there is some talk that FIFA want to try to reschedule this game. They might throw it to the end of qualifying. Both teams will have qualified by then. Jurgen Klopp said, half jokingly this week, it was kind of funny, he said, why not just give Brazil and Argentina automatic berths? They're going to qualify anyway, and that would solve everybody's problem.
Jeez. Suck it up, Buttercup. You guys, oh my goodness, all the drama going on there. It was an amazing piece of theater.
We had a set day preparing for US-Canada, so I was actually working, and I was going to watch the game later when I got home, and you started texting me, what the heck is going on in this Brazil game? And it piqued my curiosity. I'm like, wow, I guess I should check to see what he's talking about. And I saw everything.
It was nuts. All right. Well, thank you for indulging us here in this opening segment that I know went very long, but we wanted to, since we missed last week, we wanted to get as much of it out there as possible. All right. We're going to move on, right?
That's it.
All right. When we come back, we'll take a trip around Europe and all the doings over there. Don't go away. All right, we're back, and we're into our European roundup here. All right, Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the greatest players, arguably the greatest player ever to play the game, makes the big triumphant return to England and to Manchester United, and proceeds to do what he does, possibly better than anybody ever, is score goals. Was it fun? Did you enjoy it? I enjoyed it. How could you not enjoy it, other than Derek Ray? Who evidently didn't enjoy it.
I was going to bring that up when we talked Bundesliga. Right. I definitely want to get into that.
Okay.
But what the interesting thing is, when Ronaldo signed with Manchester United, there were a bunch of YouTube compilations that popped up from his first spell. And if you watch those and then watch this game, it really illustrated how much he's changed his game, which is not a criticism. I mean, he's 36 and
it's necessary.
Yeah. Because that first version of Ronaldo at United was this explosive live wire who would pick up the ball and go on these slalom runs where he would beat 3 or 4 defenders and all these step overs and crazy moves. And this weekend we saw a player who played up front as a center forward who was on the periphery of the game, not that involved, just one touch here and there, but then pops up when the opportunity presents itself and scores those goals. And that's the key. He always does that. He always pops up and gets the goal. So we don't focus on him being on the periphery of the game. We focus on how decisive he ultimately was. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a great start to life for him. And it really, that Manchester United team is stacked. I mean, they gave off the same sensation to me that I've had watching Manchester City the last couple of years, where you think about who's on the field, which is already impressive. I mean, they started with a front five, essentially, of Pogba, who this season's been playing out of his mind. Bruno Fernandes, who scored a great goal. Jadon Sancho, Mason Greenwood, and Cristiano Ronaldo. They're bringing guys off the bench like Martial and Lingard and Van de Beek. And then you think about who's not even available, like Rashford and Cavani, and you put it all together. And Juan Mata is still on this team. So, I mean, they are absolutely stacked.
Stacked to the point where you think they challenge?
Absolutely. Okay. I think they challenge. The top 4 in England is bonkers. Those 4 are probably among the 6 or 7 best teams in Europe this season. Chelsea continuing to look very impressive. They brushed aside Villa. Liverpool had a really nice commanding win away to Leeds. And then Manchester City had a nice win away to Leicester. Although, it's funny, I was talking to my dad about this. Manchester City suddenly look like they have the least imposing attack of those 4. You look at all those 4 teams on paper and you think they're the ones that might struggle to score goals some days, because they don't have that center forward. And I know he's going to try to turn Ferran Torres into that, and it's going to be kind of goal scoring by committee.
Are you really crying poor for Man City?
No, but as we talked about, missing out on Kane and then choosing not to sign Ronaldo, which if he has more performances like he had this weekend, people are going to look at that and say, boy, Pep, did you maybe overthink this one?
But I'm here for it. it. I'm here for it.
But so anyway, so yeah, those 4 teams all win. They're all looking very strong. Should be an incredible title race in England.
The the back and forth between Ronaldo and Messi, right? Obviously, the EPL sucks up most of the oxygen and sucks up a lot of our oxygen. Messi's still playing, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a ridiculous question Luis Aguilar put in the who had a better debut this season, Messi or Ronaldo? Messi came off the bench for 30 minutes and didn't score or do anything. So, I mean, how is this even a
I think the point there is
which was the bigger spectacle.
The focus too lends itself. I mean, Messi is going to come to mind when they're playing in Champions League, right? I mean, let's be honest. The league excitement factor relative to Cristiano Ronaldo playing for the EPL, and certainly over here in the U.S., these are night and day types of things.
Absolutely.
Even with Messi right now.
No, absolutely, no question. Okay. Messi's been sort of taken out of the week-to-week mix here. I mean, it'll be his first Ligue 1 start, his first game at home, the first time him, Neymar, and Mbappe start a Ligue 1 game together, the first hat trick he gets, the first great performance. That'll all be fun. But trust me, I went through this with Neymar, his first season there. The novelty does wear off, and then you do realize that it's Ligue 1, and they're like 20 points clear by the middle of the season. They're so much better than everybody else. And then you're just kind of sitting around waiting for the Champions League games. While Ronaldo playing in week to week in the Premier League, there's going to be a lot more juice there for sure.
Do you think that Derek Ray can find anything worthwhile in terms of watching Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe?
Let's flip the order here and go Bundesliga next, because I do want to get to this. So at the same time that United were beating Newcastle in Ronaldo's first game, Leverkusen and Borussia Dortmund played out an incredible match. Dortmund trailed 3 times, but ended up winning 4-3. Haaland scored 2 goals. Derek Ray called this game. And, then I guess looked at his Twitter timeline and noticed that all anybody was tweeting about was Ronaldo and Manchester United. And he got very frustrated. He went on a bit of a rant. I don't understand. What does the Bundesliga have to do to get people's attention? And, to be fair, we covered the Bundesliga for 5 years, and we struggled with that as well. Now, Ronaldo's debut for Manchester United is probably not the best day to make that argument, but we had a lot of days where we had incredible games like this, and they were up against sort of ho-hum Premier League games, and the Premier League still outdrew us, and we were incredibly frustrated by that. So it's just become this monolith, this behemoth that nobody can crack the Premier League. I mean, no matter how much, ESPN, to their credit, are going all out with La Liga and, CBS with Serie A, and everybody's making an effort to grow these other leagues, but
sure.
they just can't sort of cut into the...
I love Derek. I've known him for years, and I love the work that he does, but it just seemed like in that moment where, he was pissing into the wind and trying to make something about soccer and about himself in a way that that I just thought was laughable. I mean, this is Cristiano Ronaldo scoring goals. I don't think there's any reason why people wouldn't be excited about something like that. And to talk, and there will be moments that are exciting when it comes to the Bundesliga, but we all know, like you said, how big the EPL is. And so this should come as no surprise to him or anybody else that the world is talking about something like this. And anyway, I love you, Derek, for listening.
One thing I noticed about Derek Ray this weekend, have you noticed that he pronounces some of these German names very well? The other Bundesliga game we do have to mention is Bayern thumping Leipzig 4-1. It's been a very difficult start to the season for Jesse Marsch there, just 3 points from 4 games. And now we'll get to this in a second. They have Manchester City in the Champions League. But are you concerned at all for Jesse there?
Yeah, I mean, because it's not only if he's a losing coach, he's a losing American coach. And, this is that back and forth and that balance that players, and in this case, coaches, American players and coaches go through. You don't want to be a good American player. You want to be a good player who happens to be American. You don't want to be a good American coach. You want to be a good coach who happens to be American. But as soon as you are losing, as soon as there are problems, boom, that American part of you is going to be front and center, and it puts a bigger target on your back. I think you'd be much more liable to fire a coach or a player. I guess it's just easier. It's easier to do it. So he's got to be careful. And this is a luxury car that he was given. Okay, and there's plenty of coaches out there that would love that opportunity. And if it doesn't go well for him, I don't think they're going to stick around and just kind of let this one play out. That's not good. But I also think that Jesse's going to get down to work and he's going to find a way to solve the issues that they have. Although it doesn't get any easier this week in terms of Champions League.
In Italy, Juventus fell 2-1 to Napoli. They have just 1 point from their first 3 games, way down there in the standings. Weston McKennie did start this game. There was some talk that Juventus were going to be upset by his disciplinary issues with the U.S. and that they would consider dropping him. But I think, ironically enough, it actually played into his favor because he was rested. All the other players played more during the international break, so he got himself in the starting lineup.
Remember in Coming to America where the punishment is to go back to the palace for, I can't remember what Arsenio, whatever the character that Arsenio Hall played in it. His punishment was to go back and be bathed by so Weston McKennie's punishment was he had to go back to Juventus in Italy and Serie A, and start a game.
So Juventus fall 2-1 to Napoli. AC Milan beat Lazio 2-0. Zlatan comes on in the second half and minutes later scores. 40 years of age. Zlatan still doing Zlatan things.
You think Derek Ray cares? It's an old Derek Ray podcast. We love you, Derek, please.
And then Roma beat Sassuolo 2-1, a late winner by Stefan El Shaarawy, the Il Piccolo Faraone. This was Jose Mourinho's 1,000th game as manager, and he celebrated that late winner by running down the sideline like crazy. It was shades of this famous celebration he had when Porto knocked Manchester United out of the Champions League in the 2004 round of 16, benefiting, by the way, by Tim Howard blunder. The goal at the end came Benny McCarthy free kick. Tim Howard spills it, and Costinha comes out of nowhere and puts in the rebound. Mourinho went nuts. That was one of his first really famous moments, and he kind of rekindled that celebration here. So Roma, 3 wins out of 3 for them. Roma, Milan, and Napoli are all perfect, tied atop the table, while Juventus are way down there.
So I'm much more interested in the Juventus struggles. Do you think that they, I guess, turn it around? I know it's still early days, but do they have enough to turn it around this season, or is this going to be a struggle throughout the season?
I think a lot of people assume with bringing Allegri back, and this was before they got rid of Ronaldo, but most people in Italy were picking them to win Serie A. There was this notion that last year was a total blip and they were going to bounce back and be the old Juventus. And I think it's going to be somewhere in between. They're not going to be as bad as they were last season. They'll get it together here, but I don't think it's a given they're going to win Serie A. I think they're just one of the teams in the mix, and it's going to be pretty compelling.
I think they'd be okay with that. Okay, what else?
And then lastly is La Liga, where, interestingly enough, to tie it back around to our initial topic today, the Barcelona-Sevilla game was postponed because they felt like both teams are going to be so affected by having players coming back from the international break that they ended up postponing that match. But Real Madrid did play. It was the first game back at the Bernabeu. Remember, during the pandemic, they were playing at their training ground, the Alfredo Di Stefano Center. This one they played at the Bernabeu with fans, so it was nice scenes there. And wild game, they beat Celta Vigo 5-2. Benzema with a hat-trick. Camavinga comes on in the second half and scores on his debut. And then Vinicius had a goal as well and a brilliant all-around performance. I know they really feel like he's coming of age there and making the proverbial leap and kind of putting it all together, so that's nice to see. So Real Madrid and Atletico right now level on points. Atletico had a crazy win over Espanyol. They're both on 10 points. Real Madrid with the better goal difference. I think those two are going to really battle it out all season. To me, that's going to be the La Liga race there.
All right, more importantly, Mallorca falls to 8th. I hope he didn't play, I don't think, this week, although he might have been available. But,
mixed bag for Stu Holden because Mallorca lose, but he had a spectacular hosting performance Friday in our MLS show. And so I don't know if you saw that Rob Stone has been let go.
Yeah. So for those that didn't watch, we had our players-only MLS broadcast with myself and Stu Holden and Marisa Dew, and Stu actually did the hosting job. Did a wonderful job. He actually read what Mossy wrote, unlike others. So Mossy was in heaven to actually have a vessel for all of his poetry and his eloquence.
And then the Champions League group stage gets underway. We're taping this on a Monday, so this drops tomorrow, Tuesday, and that's when match day 1 gets underway. The big game on Tuesday, Barcelona hosts Bayern. The last time these two teams met in the Champions League, Bayern beat them 8-2, and that was with Messi and Suarez. So we'll see what the score is in this game. This Tyler Adams thing, Luis Aguilar is hot on it. Does this interest you at all?
Yeah, just say it. Why not?
I guess he went on something of a rant about how most people who know me know just how competitive I am, and nothing gets me more angry than the fact that all the German clubs just sell their best players to Bayern. It boggles my mind, man. And, because that's a point that we've made on this podcast, Luis Aguilar has deduced from that Tyler Adams must be a fan of the State of the Union podcast, even though that point's been made essentially everywhere else where people do soccer podcasts. But
right. Let's see how angry he is when he gets sold to Bayern.
That's true. But yeah, just a few other games to have an eye on. I mentioned life doesn't get any easier for Jesse Marsch and Leipzig. They're away to Manchester City. One game I'm excited about, Inter Milan hosts Real Madrid. Real Madrid won at the San Siro in the group stage last season. Atletico Madrid face Porto. That's an interesting one. Liverpool face AC Milan at Anfield. Some fun history there between these two clubs. They met in two Champions League finals. The crazy one in Istanbul 2005. Liverpool from 3-0 down to 3-3. They won on penalties. And then 2 years later, AC Milan got some revenge in Athens. Pipo Inzaghi with both goals. They won 2-1. And then Club Brugge faces PSG, which wouldn't be a big deal, except that this will likely be the first time Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe start a game together. So for all intents and purposes, PSG's season, this new era, really starts this week. And
that's when anybody really cares about him.
Yes.
I mean, let's be honest. Okay. All right. Good wrap up there, Mossy. I appreciate all the work on that. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. All right, we're back, and we have some questions here on Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there on all the platforms. And by the way, we do have that hotline, 657-549-2297, if you want to drop us a call and let us know what you're thinking. But I think this week we went with three from social media. So what's first, Mossy?
Well, you teased this topic before. At CP Mullen asked, is it possible that the best U.S. team to field for qualifiers is MLS-centric and the best U.S. team to take to the World Cup is Europe-based?
So we talked so much about resumes and about reputation. And look, every player at some point benefits from it and gets the benefit of the doubt. But I've also over the years talked about how form is fallacy. Well, the other part is that perception is not necessarily reality when it comes to players, and taking players out of comfort zones and environments in which they are successful. It can jar you in terms of how different players are. Now, this comparison between these two teams, I think, is fascinating because, Greg Berhalter was the leader of both of these teams this summer, and both of them had successes and won trophies, but they were made up of very, very different types of players, and inherently, you're going to have different types of dynamics within those two groups. And now he's being tasked. That's a good thing. But now the task is putting them both together. I guess to answer your question, I think that either one, I think right now they are not stronger than the sum of their parts. And that is Greg Berhalter's challenge, to find out a way. I think they will be better now, having gone through these first three games. So I'm not convinced going forward that either one of those teams separately would be better. In these first three games, it was readily apparent that whatever dynamics, plural, they had in the summer with those two teams, they had not managed to bring that over or mix the two together to have a super dynamic, if you will. And that's not easy. So yeah, I think what's his name here, CP Mullen.
CP Mullen, yeah.
Yes, I think it is absolutely possible that. And that's for qualifying here. And I know I'm kind of mixing and matching, but yes, the team and the stars that you see during qualifying may look very, very different to, knock on wood, when we qualify for the World Cup next summer, whatever that team ultimately is that takes the field. And there will be players that can function at a high level in some very difficult type of environments, and there's some that are going to be shrinking violets and just don't and can't figure it out. And I'm just using Sergiño Dest as an example, okay? He did not have a good first window. That can certainly change. But it might be that this player, who I think can be a great player, it might be that he will only serve a purpose at the World Cup. And so just because you were a star or played during qualifying doesn't mean you're going to be part of the World Cup. And by the way, just because you weren't a star or didn't play well or weren't even part of the World Cup process doesn't mean that you can't star in the World Cup. They are very, very separate experiences and environments. And I think you have to have the ability to accept that it might look very, very different come a World Cup in terms of the makeup. So good question there.
OV_Breezy asks, what's more impressive, the U.S. men closing the gap between them and the rest of the world, or the rest of the world closing the gap between themselves and the U.S. women?
What's more impressive? Well, I think it would be the men. I mean, when you look at the rest of the world closing the gap, the ability to make up that gap and make up that distance and a huge part of that gap very, very quickly, simply in some cases, just by putting minimal effort into a women's program, you can already become competitive. Those that put money and resource can very, very quickly rise to the elite level. When it comes to the men's team, well, first off, I would argue as to, well, the gap has been closed, but to what extent, I think that's where the argument is right now. And the U.S. has been around from a men's perspective with the rest of the world for a long time, but this is really about competing with the elites. I don't know how much of that gap has been closed, and it's a very small gap, but it is a huge challenge to try to bridge that gap. And many teams are continually doing it, including the U.S. Right now. But if that gap has been closed or is continuing to be closed from a men's perspective, I think that's much more impressive, because I think that is much harder than what just spending, as I said, minimal amounts of resources and energy can give you in the women's game, which is actually why it's so frustrating in the women's game, because you don't have to do a whole lot to actually become a player very, very quickly in the women's game. And the more that you put in, the faster and the quicker you can actually become elite. And that doesn't necessarily exist in the men's game relative to the U.S. men's national team.
And finally, at JP Meyer 70 asks, what is the strangest thing you have seen while reffing? Also, our sport desperately needs more youth refs. Can you appeal to your listeners?
Well, I mean, I would make a blanket statement that it will be one of the most interesting and the most fun, and I think ultimately rewarding things that you do in the game. And look, coaching is fine, but I think there's a really unique aspect, and you see the game very differently as a referee. So I would encourage everybody. And by the way, I do AYSO. There's no payment for AYSO. It's all volunteer. But this can be your job as a kid. When I was growing up, I refereed and I got paid to referee. So, kids getting jobs at a younger age, I think it's important. And I think it gives you a sense of responsibility and an understanding of money and a sense of self-worth. And I think it can be, incredibly beneficial and rewarding to be able to do that things. But it doesn't have to be, working at a convenience store, or working at Burger King, or working at a clothing store or something like that. It can be anything. So refereeing, if you do it right on a continual basis, you can make money doing this. And the younger you start, I love when I see kids that are refereeing out there. Okay, because first off, it takes quite a personality, especially at a young age, to do that. You go through your training, but then to put yourself out there and to make decisions and choices out there, and to put yourself in the way of potentially being screamed at and yelled at. So that's a good thing. So yes, I would appeal to all of our listeners, if you haven't done it, check it out. All right, if you want to be altruistic and do it from a charity perspective, go ahead and do that. But if you're just a business person, or you want to make some money, I think that this is a good way, especially for young folks out there. Young folks, what am I, an old man? And then what have I seen? Strangest thing? Well, look, the usual stuff out there. It's parents that scream and yell and do all those types of things. And then there's the ones that are obvious, where they're just right, and it's embarrassing for them, but more importantly, it's embarrassing for the kid. And then there's the whole other side of the spectrum, where you're so positive and you're so rah that it almost gets annoying to the kid. I suppose if you want to be on one end of the spectrum, I'd rather have you there in terms of being positive. But there also comes a point where every single thing that the person does or the team does isn't necessarily worthy of your praise. There's a reason when we go to games where you have this ebb and flow and this up and this up and down. If every time that a player threw the ball in, we cheered and clapped, that would be a little bit strange. So that's interesting. Let's see. I've been yelled at as a referee. I have been told that I don't know the laws, which may very well be the case at a certain point. When you know you're right and you still are hearing the either the completely wrong law, that people don't know the law, or the complete wrong interpretation of the law, there is a sense of fulfillment. There is a sense of superiority. But you got to pick and choose when to really come down with the hammer and say, you're wrong, and I can point to you in the laws if you would like where you are wrong. Sometimes you just let it flow and let them get it out of their system.
Did you see that funny story about a rec game, kids game that was going on in New York, and they needed somebody to referee it, and they grabbed some bald-headed Spanish guy who happened to be there, but he kept stopping the game to give instructions to the players, and the parents got mad, and it turns out it was Pep Guardiola during his sabbatical in New York.
I mean, ref the game. What are you doing? You're not a coach. You want to be a coach, Pep? Then go through the process with the AYSO situation, and you can be a coach. But until then, do what you're there to do.
I actually, when I was at Michigan, I wanted to make some extra money, so I refereed intramural basketball games, but I was dreadful. And the Michigan football team had played intramural basketball, and you haven't lived until you've had like a 300-pound lineman staring at you because you completely blew a call where he got hacked taking a shot. It was very scary stuff for me.
I mean, I think I'm digressing a little bit here, but with this, I have kids, and trying to put them in situations that are going to teach them lessons that are going to enable them to function and give them the tools to function as adults. And the leadership aspect of refereeing, the decision-making process when it comes to refereeing. There are times when, as a referee, you make a decision, all right, or at times where not making a decision is actually a decision. And there are times where even making a decision that ends up being wrong is still the right decision to make. And I know that doesn't necessarily sound logical, but all of those different things and being responsible for that decision and the outcome from it, I think that you can learn a whole lot in terms of life. And I think that those that do take the risk and show the courage to do something like refereeing, especially at a young age. Man, oh man, my hat is off to all the referees and all the referees out there that do that, but especially the younger ones, because I think it shows that you're confident in yourself to be able to put yourself out there in that way. All right, what else, Mossy?
Well, that's it for Ask Alexi.
Okay.
By the way, I thought about bringing some wings to eat during this podcast taping, but it's, the news cycle moves so fast that your controversial wings tweet already felt like old news this week because of your trip to Doha. So I thought I decided against it. I know Luis didn't even include a question about it in Ask Alexi. So it seems like we've moved on from your controversial wings take.
I found out very, very quickly that there is a whole, how they talk about soccer Twitter? There's a whole wings Twitter, okay? And I made my feelings known. And this is nothing new. I know you and others have heard them before, but I did it on Twitter, and so it was a much more public thing, and it got picked up by Barstool and all that kind of stuff. But I made my feelings when it comes to wings known, in that I think that they are a ridiculous food, okay? The return on investment is ridiculous, and they are, I think, a waste of time, and they are maddening, and they are frustrating, and I don't like them. And I know when you say that, people lose their freaking minds because of the Twitter army that is out there. And I can see, we got people here behind the scenes that are already shaking their head and they can't understand it. And, it's a vessel for the sauces, okay? But I don't understand that. And I didn't think it was going to be that controversial, but there are whole swaths of the country and areas and zones that are all about their wings and all that kind of stuff. I just think I know I would be so much better served, and I believe that others would be so much better served in terms of their resources and energy, putting it into, boneless, something like that. So anyway, if you'd like to yell at me, you get in line when it comes to the Wings. I've never had such a response of people calling me names. I get it on a daily basis when I give you my soccer takes, but damn, the Wings take, that response was atomic, on fire, and fuego. All right, Mossy, that does it for Ask Alexi. We're going to take another quick break here, and when I come back, we'll wrap up the State of the Union podcast with what we always do on the end of the State of the Union, my one for the road. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's the end of the show, and at the end of each show, I give you my one for the road. As you all know, the 20th anniversary of 9/11 happened over the weekend on Saturday, and just incredible retrospectives, and we mentioned documentaries, and there's a whole generation that either wasn't born or was too young to remember what it was like. And MLS has been around a long time. So at the time, I was playing for the Los Angeles Galaxy, and we all have our different stories. And actually, Tony Meola did a really good documentary on SiriusXM. I recommend it, because he was with the Kansas City Wizards at the time, and they were one of the few professional teams in the world that were outside of the U.S. and all of the challenges of getting that team back into the U.S. But anyway, as I said, I was with the Los Angeles Galaxy at the time. Obviously, with the time change, I woke up to a bunch of missed calls and found out very, very quickly, calling my brother back, who had been calling me on the east from the East Coast, what was going on, and obviously turning on the television. We at that time weren't in the Home Depot Center, which was what it was called originally. We were still playing and training up in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. So I made my way to training, and our coach at that time, the great and late great Ziggy Schmidt, brought us into the locker room and said, obviously, we've seen what has happened. This is not a time to be playing soccer. I want you to go home, and I want you to be with your families, which we did. For those that weren't around and don't remember, games were canceled. We played our last game for the Galaxy on September 8th. Obviously, the attacks happened on September 11th. We canceled a couple games to the end of the season and then went right into the playoffs. And our next game was September 22nd, so 11 days after the attacks, we were back playing. And our first game as the Los Angeles Galaxy was, our second game. First game was against the Metro Stars on September 22nd, and then on September 26th, we were back in New York, New Jersey, playing against the Metro Stars. So not even 2 weeks after the attacks. And we stay, because we play in New Jersey, we stayed in New Jersey, in Secaucus or something like that. And I made a point of gathering a bunch of the younger players and taking the path over, or maybe taking a car. Who knows if the path was working at that point, but obviously getting over to Manhattan and making our way as close as we possibly could to Ground Zero. And obviously you couldn't get there, but it was, I thought it was important to me, and I recruited some other, as I said, young players, and we got as close as we possibly could, but you could smell, and you could see, and you could feel still the incredible presence and the incredible sadness of the moment, even though you weren't standing right there and they had security and a perimeter, if you will. But it drew you. And as I said, there's a whole generation that it's not as if they don't know about it. It is studied, but the further and further you get away from something, the less meaning and the less personal it is for you. And that's why we talk about never forgetting. But inevitably, as we get further and further, it's going to be not forgotten. Some will forget, but it's going to be less and less personal and less relevant to future generations. But it was an incredibly sad moment and a sad time for our country. And I'll never forget that moment, as I know those of us that were alive then and lived at time will never forget it. And I hope that future generations at least have an understanding of how monumental it was for the country, for the world, and certainly for those of us that were around. And on this 20th anniversary year, I think it is important. And I was heartened to see all of the tributes and all of the, as I said, the reminiscing and the documentation of that day and what it meant to our country and to our world. And so that's just a little snippet of what we were doing as MLS. And everybody has different stories about how it impacted that season of Major League Soccer and getting back and playing, and how the world changed for all of us. And though we continued on with the league and the sport and the life that we were living, it was never the same. All right, Mossy, anything before we go?
That's it.
All right, I appreciate you, as I said, indulging us for a little longer type of podcast here. I wanted to kind of unload on everything that had happened over the week. I live an incredibly blessed and charmed and privileged life to be able to do the things that I do, and I'm incredibly fortunate. And I want to be open and try to give people a glimpse of everything that's going on. And because it was relative to soccer, I don't know, I thought maybe it would be interesting to folks out there. We'll see where it ultimately ends up when it comes to this World Cup every 2 years and the changing of the calendar and all the things that Arsene Wenger and FIFA want to do. But there's going to be a fight. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think it's actually important when it comes to something like this to get consensus and to have and to listen and to respect different and differing views out there when it comes to something big and monumental like this. And as I said, I remain open in terms of listening to different people before making a decision. And ultimately, who knows if my decision matters at all? But that's the way that in this particular instance I want to go about it, because I know that there are differing viewpoints out there. All right. Thank you for reviewing. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for rating. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for doing all the different things that you do. Thank you for participating either with the Ask Alexi questions on social media or the State of the Union podcast hotline, which once again is 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. We appreciate all of the interactions that we have. We will be back again, same time, same place next week for the State of the Union. And until then, and as always, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.